And so Sarah and I have known each other since 1988. We have had many years where we haven't had contact with each other, but her experience with Japanese and when she was, and I should say she was young. I believe just like maybe a sophomore in college, or I'm not sure, and in 1988. But I counted on her as one of my key staff members for a number of years. And Sarah went on to go back to Japan. She's an author. She has written a memoir of teaching and living in Japan. She taught in Japan as an English teacher, and in the country, in the inaka, we call it, of Japan, which is very different than teaching in the city. She's a yoga instructor. She and very interesting, she plays the koto, which is a traditional Japanese instrument. It's the very long, looks like it plays somewhat like a harp, but it's really long. You have to wear, usually people who play it wear a kimono. It's a very formal type instrument and traditional. So anyway, I invited Sarah because I thought that she has such a great story. I've read her book a couple times, and every time I read it, I feel like I'm in Japan. I can almost taste and smell Japan as I read her book. Anyway, thanks for joining us, Sarah. Michi, I call her Michi Sensei, and she calls me Junko Sensei. So if you hear us using those names, that's just our Japanese names. Thank you for coming today.
You bet. Well, thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate this. It's just really fun to share a little bit of my story and to be part of Junko Sensei's group here for a day. And yeah, I laughed when she was saying that she counted on me, because I had just finished my freshman year in college, and I had spent, I think, was it 6 or 7 weeks in Japan is all I had under my belt at that point. And it's like, wow, that's the joy of getting in on the ground floor of an organization. Like, she needed people. So.
It was crazy. It was a crazy time.
It was completely crazy. And I'm so thankful that you took me on, Junko Sensei. It was wonderful.
I'm glad we know each other.
Yeah. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen to put my PowerPoint up there. I apologize if this is clunky. I haven't done this for a little while, which is strange. And I'm actually not seeing it. Just one second here. Well, isn't that wonderful? Sorry, one second.
All right.
Might be a green button that says share screen at the bottom of the main screen if you're looking.
Yeah, I've got that. However, how do I get to my PowerPoint? It's giving me options that I don't need.
So it'd be like share a browser or share a program.
Yeah.
PowerPoint program.
I'm just gonna reopen it. Sorry, just give me 1 second here. I apologize. I thought I had this all set up. And the main reason I want to have my PowerPoint open is to show you a few pictures of what I call home in Japan.
Well, while Sarah's trying to get this set up, I'll just say one of my memories of Sarah at the Language Village was we were trying to do traditional songs and dances, and she volunteered right away. We had to learn some of the dances, the Japanese traditional dances, where you wear the yukata, the kimono, and the fans and all. And we had a couple of native speakers who taught us the dances, but they were only there like a week. Anyway, Sarah took that on and did excellent. And now I see she has her PowerPoint, so I'll be quiet.
Oh, yeah. Somehow I ended up being the dance instructor, which is kind of a kick. nobody saw that coming, believe me, especially not my parents or friends. But it was a wonderful opportunity, one of many through the language villages. So I'm bringing this talk, I'm calling it Our Hearts Bring Us Home. And I think anybody who's had an exchange student, been an exchange student, or even just moved from one part of the United States to another, one part of the world to another, has this sense of where is my home? What is home to me? So that's what I'm talking about a bit here. I would just like to say that when I first went to Japan, it wasn't exactly to the Inaka, but it was the Japanese kind of considered it Inaka because it was a town of 50,000 or a city of 50,000 right on the Japan Sea. And, sorry, there's my book that Junko is referring to. The Same Moon is the title of my memoir. So I started off at this place called Hagishi, which is on the Sea of Japan. And I was the first exchange student in the city. This was in 1986. I didn't speak Japanese. My host family didn't speak English. I was the only foreigner in sight. And so it was a very isolating experience initially for, a young person from Minnesota. I'm from Moorhead, Minnesota, and that's where I headed over there from. And, it was one of those things where you think, like, I'm going to be here how long? Limping along with no language skills and really not knowing what I was supposed to do ever. I feel like I became an expert in peripheral vision because I was always looking at what my host sisters were doing and trying to emulate whatever they were doing because I didn't have the first clue about how to act or what to do. But it's funny, as I mentioned, I was only there like 7 or 8 weeks. And I know by the end, I actually I'd have strangers come up to me all the time saying, where are you from? Where are you from? And they're expecting me to say either the United States or England or Australia or something. And by the end, I would say Hagi. I would just say my host family's town because that is how connected I felt after just, a month and a half of being in that family in Hagi. And of course that threw people and they would push me further and I'd say, no, I'm from Hagi. That's it. And in a way though, I feel like I've maintained that all these years. It's been 37 years now since I met that host family. And I still do feel like I have this home in Hagi. Fast forward a little bit, I married soon after graduating college and it did not work out. And I kept thinking, like, as I was heading into a separation, then a divorce, at the age of 24 or something, I mean, it was ridiculously young. This just did not work. I kept thinking, I just want to go back to a time when I'm happy. I just want to go back to a time when I was happy. And I kept thinking of Japan, that summer, that idyllic summer, which wasn't idyllic at the time, but it sure became idyllic in my mind. And so I applied for the JET program, which you might have heard of, the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, which is run by the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I think, in Japan. And I was hired on as a teacher and I asked to go back to Hagi because I was trying to recreate this, kind of mythical, idyllic time in my life and ended up in a place called Shuhocho, which you're seeing there. Shuhocho is about an hour's drive from Hagi. And unlike most places in Japan, it had no train station. So when I say it was an hour's drive, it was an hour's drive if you had a car. If you did not have a car, it could take you all day to get there with transferring from bus to other bus to maybe train. And again, I found myself out in the only foreigner, the first teacher in this situation. People didn't quite know how to use me as the teacher in their schools. I was supposed to be in the junior high schools or the middle schools there. And, so I kind of abandoned my wrecked young adulthood for another challenge where I spoke more Japanese, thanks in large part to working with Junko sensei at the language village and studying some Japanese in college. But again, I was really like a fish out of water. And this is mostly what I wrote. This period of time is mostly what I wrote about in my memoir, The Same Moon. Here's another, this is right near my apartment building, which was on the side of a rice paddy, which was on the side of another rice paddy, and little mountains around us. And it was very much country. I'll just to give you a sense. So here's, these are a lot of my coworkers, and my mom came to visit with her friend. And so I got to show them around at the time. This is a sports festival, and that's the apartment I lived in. So I was right across the street from one of my schools. So it was convenient, I guess, but also I was always on show. My wonderful students. This is at another middle school. And they also lured me into doing elementary school or primary school, which was fantastic because compared to the middle school students, the primary school students had no qualms about trying English, and they actually made great progress. And they always taught me something like, I think here we were planting sweet potatoes. We harvested rice, we harvested sweet potatoes, we did all sorts of things together. And there's some more elementary school students. So just to give you a little flavor for this place where I got to spend time. So the tagline of my book is, sometimes you have to run far, far away to find your way home. And when I wrote that tagline, as I was wrapping up the book, I was kind of thinking about how, in my case, I felt like I had to run away to come back to a life in Minnesota, because I felt like I'd made such a mess of my original life, sort of. So I kind of ran away to find my way home. But as time has gone on, I've been thinking a lot about how I think that tagline actually is closer to meaning sometimes you have to run far, far away, kind of to find your other home, to find that you have many homes in this world. Because I think that is more of what I learned from my experience of going to Shuhocho. What made it home for me? And, part of it was those relationships I built with the students and with just with the surroundings around me there. But then, of course, I got pulled into other things with the adults in my community. And these are some of the really special people in my life there. I was pulled into a Koto club. And you see, we're all wearing kimono there. And as Junko Sensei was saying, the Koto is a very formal instrument. And we often were dressed in kimono to play it. I'm sorry, are you hearing a little drum roll right now in the background? Just give me 1 second here, please. I'm just gonna mute. Oh, I can't mute. Oh, well, just 1 second here. Daniel. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. I have a budding drummer here. The joy of Zoom. So these are some very special people who really helped me to feel like Shuhocho was my home, because they brought me under their wing. They taught me Koto, and the woman right next to me actually was my sensei. And she actually would not let me leave Japan without bringing a Koto home with me, in the hopes that I would share the Koto with other people in my home country. So they made it feel like home. This is just for your interest. This is Koto music, and we play it top to bottom, right to left. So that's Aki no Uta, a song of autumn. And here's what the Kotos look like. So the other things that I was finding, being in this other place was just how the expectations were so different. And I always compared, like, this would not be happening in Minnesota. That was one of the things I kept kind of going back to. This would not be happening in Minnesota. And one of the things was with tea serving. I found that I was not asked to, but I think expected to help serve tea with the other women in my offices. And so in one office in particular, I would serve 4 times a day. And I remember feeling just very much like, how is it possible that I am probably in a more, I don't know how to exactly put it, but in a role that's even more conservative than I think what my grandmothers had in their office jobs. All of a sudden I'm taking orders, and, the men are hanging out and having a smoke while the other women and I are, busily running around, making sure we have the right cup for the right person, the right strength, and all that sort of thing. And it was just very interesting. It felt very not homey, but after a while, it kind of became part of the second home for me as well. So one of the things that I found really brought kind of me into the community was they had things like nature viewing parties. And this is a photo from Hanami, which is the cherry blossom viewing, where we all went to Hagi, which is actually the original city I was in. And everybody drove over there because it has a beautiful castle grounds with all these wonderful cherry trees. And so these are my colleagues from work, all under the cherry trees. And we would just sit there and, eat and drink and visit. And in different seasons, there was the full moon viewing party. There was the cherry blossom viewing party. There was the firefly viewing. There was snow viewing, and all these things built community. And these relationships kept grounding me and drawing me in and helping me to feel more and more at home in this place. And I thought that I'd like to share with you just a little section from my book, which kind of illustrates this. I won't give you much of a preview, but I'll just share it with you. This is from, I guess it was my first, after I'd been there almost a year. And I was with a family that lived near me. The dad was one of my supervisors, and he actually kind of became my nemesis for a while because he was very much against me getting a car, and I thought I needed a car. But his daughter was a very good friend of mine. So I was over at their house for dinner. So I'll read. One June evening, Naoko invited me over for a make-your-own sushi supper. Using sheets of nori seaweed like little tortillas, we made the Japanese equivalent of fajitas, scooping pickled rice onto the seaweed and topping it with boiled chicken and prawns, long cucumber sticks, and slices of rolled egg omelets, all of it daubed with wasabi and plum paste. We were watching our usual early evening television programs, and these were Elf reruns, surreally dubbed in Japanese, and quiz shows featuring stars playing charades for money and prizes. Suddenly, Naoko's mother turned to me and asked in Japanese, "Have you ever seen a firefly?" Having been living in Japan for nearly a year, I had already seen the autumn moon, the falling snow, and the cherry blossoms, all events that prompt viewing parties. I had not expected insects to make the list of observable happenings. But just like that, the whole family, Grandma, Dad, Mom, and Naoko, were up and headed toward the door. It was time, they told me, to see the fireflies. I told her mother that I already was familiar with fireflies. My cousins and I used to chase them at my grandparents' home in Illinois. The whole family stopped and looked at me, surprised. Fireflies in America? Not to be daunted, they asked if I had seen fireflies in Japan. I replied, sure, there had been a few in the lot behind my apartment. I felt smug and thought I had this viewing season covered. They looked amused and drew me outside. I could appreciate taking time to contemplate the changing seasons, but these gatherings were never what I expected. The first viewing party I had attended in Japan had been inspired by a full autumn moon and was held by a group of Shuhocho town workers. We climbed onto the roof of the community gymnasium, where I was prepared to gaze quietly and appreciatively at the best full moon of the year. But the event, as it unfolded, seemed more an excuse to visit, sitting on a plastic tarp as we ate and drank our way through a spread of crackers, cookies, beer, and sweet dango, soft, powdery, rice-based balls that traditionally are eaten during the autumn moon viewing. There were few comments made about the full orb shining spectacularly above us. Then, as spring approached, I eagerly awaited the cherry blossoms and the viewing parties they were said to trigger. I envisioned scenes reminiscent of old woodblock prints, demure kimono-clad figures sitting in a haze of blooms. What a lovely way to celebrate the arrival of warmer days. Again, the event spawned parties, and this time the blue tarps laid out amid the pale pink blooming trees, which were mostly ignored as revelers drank a special cherry blossom rice wine, ate treats, and visited and laughed. Although the activity they were participating in was called hanami, flower viewing, they seemed almost unaware of them. That June evening, when Naoko's family led me outside to see the fireflies, was warm and moonless, and we simply walked away from their farmhouse toward a narrow, rocky part of the Koto River. We brought no food or drink with us, no blue tarp, not even a flashlight. Soon we were nearing the dark waterway. "Look," I said, a little surprised at the glittering lights I saw through the trees. "Uh-huh," they said, unimpressed. "Come on." I walked with them to a small bridge that spanned the river and saw that by then we were surrounded by hundreds, maybe thousands of fireflies. They were in the rushes, along the grassy banks, in the grove of trees, above us, and all around. They blinked on, off, as fireflies do, and most of them blinked in unison. It had been years since I had seen fireflies in the United States, and against my expectation, I was amazed. It was as if there were a leader in this cloud of insects saying, "Say no, on, say no, off." I could not help thinking that Japanese fireflies, like Japanese people, have a group-oriented culture. I felt a kinship with the few bugs that were blinking on the offbeat. The five of us watched the fireflies. I was transfixed, but Naoko's grandmother seemed a little disappointed. "The numbers are down this year," she muttered. We all stood quietly together in the dark and watched, and I began to understand Japan's tradition of nature viewing. It is not merely about observing a natural phenomenon. It is about sharing an experience. It is not simply about seeing fireflies, looking at the moon, watching the snowfall, or appreciating flowers. It is about giving people an opportunity to be together, to find community. Here in Shuhocho, with the full moon, with the cherry blossoms, and with the fireflies, I had found and joined a community. Naoko elbowed me out of my reverie. "Look up," she said, "millions of fireflies." I moved my gaze from the riverside grasses, through the trunks and branches, to the treetops, to the star-filled sky. So I share that because I feel like it expresses how culture kind of evolved into community for me, and against all expectations. In my case, I went for 1 year. That was my plan. And I sort of got, I don't know if it's lured into, I said that earlier, or lulled into or encouraged into staying a second year. And it just drew me deeper into that community and those relationships. And I just feel like that's what it comes down to. And with all of these cross-cultural opportunities, I feel like the relationships are what sort of make it and keep us all engaged with each other. I have a couple more slides. This is Naoko. And actually, I was back again to visit last October. So she and I got together and recalled our times in Shuhocho. And here's another part of Shuhocho, just to show you a little more of the beauty of the place. And then for contrast, this is Hagi, where my host family lives. It's an old castle town, so you can see the old walls. And those are my host parents, 37 years later. Now they're older than my host grandma was when I first visited. And I'm older than they were when I was their exchange student. And they still call me their third daughter. So I consider that one of the biggest compliments of my life, that they would feel that way about me. And there we are, of course, doing the COVID thing. And yeah, and so there's a lot more anecdotes like this in my book, but and if you want more information about it, at my name, sarahcoomber.com/resources. I have information on getting the book, which is available on all sorts of online places. And I also do a newsletter, which has been on hold a little bit because, Gail, I've been working with my parents who are heading into that assisted living thing. So I have not been writing as much lately. I also have some resources for writing if you're ever interested in sharing some of your experiences. I have like a quick start writing PDF that kind of can help you jumpstart your way into working on a memoir moment of sorts. So feel free to take a look there if you're interested in that at all.
Thanks.
That. I know Junko Sensei said that you guys might have questions, so I'll just stop at that point. And if there's anything that you'd like me to share, I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. You just have this very captivating way of reading your story, and I want more. But thank you. Yeah, who has a question for Sarah?
So I do, because even though I've heard koto a number of times and seen it, how heavy is a koto?
Oh,
And how long is it? And how did the mailing work? So it's a very odd question, but I just keep thinking about it.
yeah. So the koto is about 6 feet long,
Yeah.
and it's about this high. I mean, it kind of goes. It's like that, that shape, but it's hollow, thankfully. So it's two pieces of Paulownia wood, which is a wood that I believe is native to China and Japan, that area. I don't think we have any Paulownia trees or cutie trees here. And it's known as a pretty light wood. So yeah, it's not awfully heavy. But to get it home, the only way I was allowed to get it home was airmail.
So I had airmail.
Airmail. Yeah. And I think it cost like the equivalent back then in the mid 90s, about $300 to airmail it home.
Wow.
Yeah. But totally worth it, right? I mean, it was amazing to have that and to be able to bring that back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course, it comes with a fair amount of gear as well, because it has these movable bridges.
Right.
The strings are fixed, but this movable bridges, and then you have stands and all that sort of stuff too. But, yeah.
And the music is so interesting too, because it's like numbered. I mean, it's a lot of numbers. I could read that, but not anything like Western music.
Yeah, and I've been told it's tablature. That's the classification of how it's written.
What does that mean?
And I'm told that means like when you use the numbers of the strings to tell you what to do. And so
that makes sense.
Yeah, and so you have these numbers that tell you which strings to pluck, but also just to add to the fun, with the koto, the right hand has 24 different techniques that it can employ. So whether you're using your thumb, the fingers, because you've got tsume, plectra on 3 fingers. So it's like ivory, kind of like fingernails.
Nails, yeah.
Yeah, and you have a leather band and then this long plectra coming out of it, ivory thing. And you can play with a thumb, 2 fingers. You can go backwards, you can go forwards, you could go like that. You can, I mean, there's just so many things. So 24 techniques in the right hand and 14 in the left. So all of those little things are marked as well in that music. So it's kind of a lot to keep your eye on.
Yeah.
And it's a pentatonic scale too. So there's that. But yeah.
That's crazy.
What does that mean, pentatonic scale?
So that means like in an octave, you have 5 notes essentially.
Oh, fine.
Yeah. And the nice thing.
That's what I thought, but yep.
Yeah. The really nice thing with the koto, though, is because the bridges are movable and because you can also press the string to get to a half step or a whole step. I mean, you have really umpteen opportunity. Like you can set it up in so many different ways to play it. So my koto sensei in Portland, I ended up studying for 10 more years in Portland, Oregon, because I found a koto teacher there. And she had us playing Stephen Foster songs.
Oh.
Camptown Ladies. I'm not even sure that's politically correct anymore, but that's what we ended up doing. You could play Stephen Foster on your koto, but then there's a lot of there are many different like scales that are set up in this pentatonic way, and they're all named. And so they'll say Hirajoshi is the kind of basic scale, and it means tranquil tuning. So that's one. And then they've got all these other ones. So the koto can have very ominous sounds, and it can also have very like major happy sounds. So
Yeah, it's a pretty instrument.
it is. Yeah.
Sarah, I want you to know that while you were speaking, because I'm terrible at just focusing on one thing, I bought your book.
Oh,
So you sold one more copy.
thank you, Gail. That's really kind of you. I hope you
No,
enjoy
it's
it.
absolutely self-serving. I wanted to read it.
Oh, well, I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I hope it inspires you to maybe go to Japan if you haven't
Yeah.
been yet.
I have been lucky enough to be there, but for a very short period of time. So I'm sure it will be a little different point of view.
Yeah, probably. Cool.
And-
Thank you.
Joe, we
Joe,
can't.
you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Yeah, okay. So
Right.
I've never been to Japan, so I don't, I'm curious here. I think Westerners tend to think of Japan, and I saw this somewhat in China, as rather culturally homogenous. You were in rural Japan. Obviously, we have a rural-urban conflict difference, whatever you want to say here in the U.S. And Anne, maybe you could even comment. Is there that kind of cultural differences over there, or is it in fact as homogenous as we tend to think it is?
Well, I'll say what my thoughts, and then Junko Sensei, I'd love to hear what you think. I don't feel like it's that homogenous. I feel like there's an undergirding of basic understanding in the culture, where like everybody has, how can I even say, it seems like everybody kind of knows the same things. You know, they have this understanding of koto, or they have this understanding of shamisen, they have this understanding of games. They have this real, like, kind of bedrock of similarity. But then within that, in my experience, I feel like there is so much diversity in that, like, every community, even a small town, has its special meibutsu, its special food that maybe it makes, and it's the only place that makes it, or it's one of few places that makes it. Or they have special gift things that they make, special arts and crafts. And those you can find at the train stations and purchase there. And it just seems like there's a lot within the country that they actually have, maybe even more than here, as I'm thinking out loud, where it's like, yes, our point of pride is this specific thing that they really point to. And in that way, I'd say there's a lot of heterogeneity throughout. Junko Sensei, what do you think?
Well, I agree. And I was thinking too that with your picture, that your first picture, and you were in the country, and my first experience living in Japan was in the country too, in Inaka. A lot of Americans don't realize that over 75% of Japan is mountainous. And so most of the country is rural. And so and they developed this community and group like culture. But then with the big cities, and then Japan has always been on the forefront of, I don't know, the technology and the with the young people, it's the music and the anime and all that kind of stuff. I think it's very diverse, but at the same time, there's that underlying basis that we're Japanese, and this is our shared group. So that group concept that you kind of talked about when you're talking about that cultural viewing, I think that's still very strong with the Japanese core, if that makes sense. But and you do see, especially when you go to the cities in Japan, people from all over the world, and it's becoming very, and the Japanese are getting more used to having that, I think, too. Whereas it used to be, everybody would just go nuts if they saw somebody who wasn't Japanese. It's not like that anymore, I don't think, especially in the cities.
I would like to just expound on that, what you just said there. So I went back in October, I went back to Shuhocho, and that's the place where when I was there, in 1994 to 96, students would come around the corner. And if I was coming around the other side of the corner and they ran into me, they would scream. And it was usually, they'd be like, oh, blue eyes, or it was the hair or my height or whatever. But like, there was a lot of screaming. And in fact, I was in a grocery store and some little kids pointed at me and they said I was Chinese. They're like, Chugo-kuji, and
Yes.
Chinese person. Like, because you could either be Japanese or Chinese, apparently.
Yeah.
There was all that. And I felt so separate. I felt so obvious. And then this time when I went to Shuhocho to visit, nobody batted an eye. And it was the strangest thing where I was like, don't they realize that, you also like, don't they notice I'm here? But it was so awesome because it's like their efforts at internationalization have worked, is what I was seeing, They just were like, oh, hey, and they kept going. And people actually expected me to speak Japanese to them instead of like putting up this wall when the Japanese came out of my mouth to be like, I don't speak English. It's like, no, I'm speaking Japanese to you. And they they used to not hear it, but I felt like now they hear it, right?
Right. That's exactly true. Yeah. I was first in rural Japan as well, as a Rotary exchange student in 1976, and I was in Miyagi-Ken, which is in the northern part. But I was the only non-Japanese person, I don't know, in the whole prefecture. I don't know. I actually had been there a year. I was the first exchange student the town had ever had. And everybody knew me. I thought I was getting ready. I was starting to get ready to go home after my year, and I was shipping some boxes home. So I'd be walking to the post office or with my big box to do ship home by the sea. And this woman actually she was on the other side of the street riding her bike, and she was looking at me, and she actually ran into the curb and fell off her bike. Because she could not believe there was a white person in Shirishi. And apparently that was, there were a few people who hadn't seen me during my, 10 months there or whatever, and she was one of them. But in people, there were a lot of people who had never met anybody who was certainly non-Asian. They had seen on TV, but not, so that has really changed, I think, like Sarah was saying, and also that idea of speaking somebody who's who doesn't even look Asian, speaking an Asian language has changed as well. But it's still surprising to some people, occasionally,
And you talk about the internationalization has sort of worked a little bit. It's been a number of years, but I was at a university where we had a relationship with a Japanese university. Some of their faculty came over. They were older men. And at one point, one of them said he had little faith in the young Japanese because all they wanted to do was to play music and wear blue jeans. And in the back of the room, an American student went, "We win."
Nice.
that's a funny story. Thank you so much. Or arigato, right?
Oh, yeah.
Doitashimashite.
And that's perfect because since you're in the Azores, arigato is from the Portuguese.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Because
I
of the
didn't know that.
Portuguese were the first missionaries to Japan. And so that's
There's-
like tempura and arigato that came from Portuguese.
Oh,
And
wow.
actually, there's even the word pagoda, it used in certain sayings and idioms, and there's a huge influence here.
Mhm.
And I'm still learning about that because I'm brand new here. But
Well, yeah.
thank you so much. Now, I did not forget, Sarah, you did want to take a screenshot of our
Oh,
group,
yeah.
right?
Would that be okay?
Right, is everyone okay with that? Yep, yeah, how's your hair?
But we're actually in the witness protection program, but we'll take the chance.
You'll take your chance on this one.
This is the moment where you put your wig, yeah,
Yeah, there you
on,
go.
or take it off,
Rosie,
or
come here.
whatever.
All right. You got a cat there to come in?
Yeah, I'm trying to get a pet, but
Bring your
Oh,
pets
well.
to Rotary.
All right. Here we go. Ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Sensei.
Thank you. I think I got it. I'll double check here really quick before I lose you.
Oh, thank you,
Got
thank you.
Thank
Arigato,
you.
arigato.
Arigato gozaimashita.
And one quick thing, could you write in the chat if you're planning on coming to the in-person, March 31st, starting 6:30 at
Gail and
Ann's.
Joe, you need to make a road trip.
Yeah, but the road trip's gonna be from California.
Oh, well.
They're on a
Not
cruise.
back in until the 1st.
Oh,
That's the last
no.
day of our cruise. We'll be in there the next day.
All right.
But the road trip is on our agenda, John.
All right.
Okay.
Very good.
Let us know
By the way, John,
whenever
if you need
because
some
we
help-
can arrange something.
John, if you need some help with the project, let me know. Be happy to help out.
Thank you. Thank you so much.